We are commencing the session 3. Silakan masuk kembali, duduk kembali. Please take your seats. We are commencing very soon. Asia Foundation sponsor. Good afternoon all. Welcome back to the Indonesia Update. My name is Lila Sari, a PhD candidate from the Australian National University. It is my pleasure today to chair the session with the team of Governing Urban Indonesia with these two distinguished speakers who will be delivered this session. It is also my honor to introduce our speakers today. Firstly, Muhammad Mustafa, who will present the patterns of urban reform, the role of political coalitions, and mobilization. Mustafa is the Program Director for Democracy and Governance at the Asia Foundation Indonesia. He holds a PhD from the University of Adelaide with the doctoral research on the political economy of bureaucratic reform in Indonesia. Secondly, I'd like to introduce Bapak Erman Rahman, who will talk about local budgets and how different characteristics require different fiscal policies. Erman is an experienced development practitioner. He is the Senior Program Director of the Asia Foundation Indonesia and is currently leading the implementation of USAID project ERAT. He holds a master's degree in transportation from Northwestern University, Illinois, USA. Ladies and gentlemen, in terms of the structure of the session 3 today, each of the speakers will be given up to 20 minutes to deliver the presentations. I will remind them when the speakers have 5 and 1 minute left to speak. And after the presentations, we will have a questions and answer session for up to 20 minutes. We will invite people from both the in-person and also the online audience. And for the in-person audience, you can raise your hand. And for the online audience, you can type your questions in the Q&A box in the Zoom. And without further ado, I would like to invite Mustafa to give his presentation.
Selamat siang. Thank you everyone for this opportunity. I hope you had your coffee already to wake you up in this afternoon. I will discuss about the pattern of urban politics and good governance in Indonesia at this session. By good governance, please be, I limit the definition into clientelism and corruption. So the topic will be around that one. I will divide it, my presentation in very short, in very clear-cut session. One is short background and proposed argument, and the case study that will take longer in the discussion, and then the lesson after that. Let's start the background. When we talk about decentralization that started in 1999 or 2001, depending on your point of view, when it started, there have been like a lot of questions whether or not decentralization actually lead to good governance. There have been studies that actually there is not much convincing evidence. Instead, there is like a different outcome, different city, different localities, that some are good in performing and the other are not. Rather, there have been like in there have been like an agreement within the political economies in seeing our landscape of the local politics, where we see the predatory elite capture is being the feature of our local politics right now. Some also see that good governance has been promoting well by the role of the leadership, but we will talk later on more on this one. I argue that yes, predatory elites is important at the local level, at the local city, and I don't disagree on that. I would also support those who believe that leadership is very important in the context of promoting good governance at the local leaders. But my emphasis here is like the civil society. I believe that civil society force can determine the extent to which the predatory elites and leadership influence the performance of good governance in urban area. This issue on the role of civil society has not much discussed actually in the current study on the local politics in Indonesia, especially in the context of urban governance. To support that argument, now we go to the real city, to the very local city. I give you three examples of the city. One is Surabaya, which is I am very confident. The second is Bogor, which is I am very nervous because the mayor is here. The third is South Tangerang that everyone hates, so it's easy to explain. Surabaya is well known. I talk Surabaya because it is a very well known city. I will not discuss more, but very well known city in Indonesia in terms of promoting reform. Bogor have been strong progression in the last 10 years, but actually Midway still have challenge in the context of the clientelism and corruption. And South Tangerang, it is like basically elite capture city where elite capture does occur. Now we see the Surabaya. This is the version of Risma not marah-marah. Yeah? It's the coolest version of Risma. Yeah, we start that Surabaya is like the most reform city. It used to be, Surabaya is called as the city of theft. Kota Maling Surabaya, to replace KMS, Kota Madya Surabaya. That was in the beginning of the Reformasi. Now Surabaya has transformed into the best city in advancing good governance and service delivery. The city landscape has changed almost radically compared to the 20 years ago. You might believe that it is because of Risma, right? Risma does have very important roles in the last in the sequence of 2010 and 2020 in the strong advancement of Surabaya. But actually, Surabaya reform has begun since the early momentum of reformasi in 2023. So Risma is following up. But Risma is very important for us because she is a woman leader with strong assertiveness in promoting good governance, especially in combating clientelism and corruption in the city. She is like straightforward, have ability to confront those who are against her reform agenda, and also often like taking harsh actions against his bureaucrats who are unprofessional or corrupt. But the point in here is like, Risma, in fact, is not the only, it's not about only her leadership that it makes Surabaya advance. Actually, in the context of Surabaya, it is civil society that's actually pretty much give a landscape for Risma to be able to counter those who are against her reform agenda. Let's talk about the civil society of Surabaya. Civil Surabaya have been known for a city with vibrant civil society even since Indonesian independence. There have been like strong root of activism through, for example, Kampung Improvement Program, for example. There have been like the center of activism during Suharto era, and there have been like a feature of the long experience of collaboration between state and civil society. Active engagement of the city, there are a lot of NGO, a lot of media as well. If you know Jawa Post were very active. There are also Suara Surabaya, a radio that specifically aired issue about urban issues, complaint handling, etc. University also active to talk about the city situation. So that situation allows Surabaya to have daily conversation, pro and con, and then critique to policy or supporting the policy over time to create continuous demand for the city issues. And what happened is actually, if we see Risma was a bureaucrat with introvert, inconfident as a leader. Until the civil society asked her to become the mayor, and then promote her as a mayor, promoted by PDIP. There is time when Risma was impeached by DPRD because of rising tax. But then civil society come together to save Risma. And since then, Risma was very confident to confront anyone because of behind her are actually civil society and grassroots. And that's why in her tenure, there are always confrontation. But that's the way Surabaya advanced over time, through confrontation, but with strong support with civil society. Now we move to our mayor, the handsome one. This is Bogor have been significantly progressed in the last 10 years. We glad to have reform leaders, Bima Arya here, the alumni of this university, and very innovative. He has activist background with doctoral degree and of the innovative idea. There have been a lot of improvement in the public services, local landscape, environmental management, but not much in the context of clientelism and corruption. The mayor, you will have answer right at the end of the session, but it's okay. But why? Why a leader like mayor cannot do much on the clientelism and corruption? Limited civil society activism. Bogor is very quiet civil society. The only activism is on the cultural thing, musician, hobbies, thing like that. So there is not much pressure for government reform to prevail in the city. Meanwhile, the relationship before Bima, mayor, attorney general, DPRD, bureaucrat, police, mass civil society, media, the relationship have been lubricated by clientelism and corrupt issues. They were at the same interest on that clientelism. The mayors come in is alone, no one to that support him. He then become realistic in the situation. It is impossible that time for him to do daily confrontation with them, with those. In fact, there was also increasing expectation on the improvement of service delivery by the mayor. So the mayor have to be in this under pressure. The mayor choice is okay, let's do. We perform in the service delivery, but distance himself with the clientelism and corruption issues. The most important is he always proclaim to not protecting or endorsing any clientelism and corrupt practices. And this was happening. It was good, the result has been. It has been claimed that the corruption has been less systemic without support from the leadership, even though such approach is not enough to break down the clientelism structure. The mayor also tried to nurture young bureaucrats and place them in the strategic position gradually. But this enforcement is very slow. Today, the mayors will end up the tenure in 2029, and the end of this year. But the clientelism is still there. And then that, because the root is very strong since, and then that the reformist bureaucrat is still outnumbered by those by the unreformist one. Next, we go to Tangerang. South Tangerang is very rich city, south of Jakarta. The city growed very well, along with the agglomeration of the Jakarta. Most of the city are rich. The poverty is very low. Development outcome is very great with the autopilot. But the city is actually captured. The city is established in 2008, and since then captured by the dynasty called Hasan Sohib dynasty. It's the prominent dynasty in Banten and at national level. I have to check my note because this is about thing. So the dynasty capture have put legislative and executive position in all district in Banten area. One of which is in Tangerang Selatan. The governor, it used to be we called Ratu Atut, that many of you know, is like the center of the dynasty through the provincial governor. That is until 2013. So with that capture, since the beginning, the city is like managed by that dynasty for their clientelism purposes. They distributed project, they put the bureaucrat based on their interest and also etc. Nothing we can help. It's just well captured by the dynasty. But why is related to civil society? So actually what happened in South Tangerang is there are a lot of activists in South Tangerang. A lot of international NGO staff, NGO leaders are living in South Tangerang actually. I and Erman also living in there, but do nothing with the city. Yeah. But many of the activists don't care about the city. Their connection is more to Jakarta. So we left the city alone with the dynasty capture. Meanwhile, upper class are mostly living in the real estate, also with strong connection to Jakarta too. So their connection to the city is very low. For example, in the local election, only 60% turnout in the last election of mayoral election. And because of middle class and high class supposedly like contribute to the low turnout. So of course, yeah, Tangerang is nothing we can help with South Tangerang about this one. Meanwhile, there are also mass civil society, mass organization established since 2012, since 2010, in the early beginning of the city. But most of them are established to deal with the dynasty for economic purposes. So the transaction with the project, they ask for money. If we call about media, they ask for government project, and etc. So uncivil society, clientelist network, almost in South Tangerang have no challenge. So we come to what is the conclusion now? Okay. So the conclusion is like when we talk about urban and consolidation, it's not necessarily that we see strong civil society activism in urban setting. Before the question, when I called civil societies can be NGO, university, active citizen, and etc. So more broader definition. When there is convergence of civil society and reformist leaders like Surabaya, it promises more for transformative reform. Reformist leader, in the absence of civil society, might lead to compromise. And that predatory leaders, with the absence of civil society, facilitate predatory capture. The last thing is just come to in my mind when I do this presentation. It is important for us to work on civil society in Indonesia. We have been focusing on the institutionalization, regulation, but we have been lagged behind when we talk about civil society that are actually the only available forces that we can promote to challenge predatory elites. With that, I close this speech. Thank you.
Screen of the mess. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for having me here. I'm here representing two of my colleagues, Ihsan Hairudin and Ronaldo Octaviano. All of us, such as Mustafa, are working at the Asia Foundation, while the three of us are working on this USAID local governance reform project called RAT. Today, I'll present our analysis on local budget in urban areas in Indonesia. Don't expect such an exciting presentation that Mustafa just delivered. But I don't have guts to talk about Bogor, Pak Bima, so I will talk about like the national landscape. That would allow us to have a better understanding of different urban and public service progress and challenges, as well as local budget revenues and expenditures based on different urban characteristics. This is related to Ayumi's presentation, the last presentation that we just saw. Ayumi was talking about the categorization of urban-rural at the village ward level. While I have like concern about like categorization of kota and kabupaten at the district level, that we feel that it's very far away from being able to differentiate characteristics that can be useful for analysis. Hence, we try to establish 7 categories of urban districts based on administrative type. We still maintain the administrative type, population density, as well as percent of urbanized villages or wards or localities that Ayumi was talking about. We found that if you can see here, where is the... Is it working? The gray dots in the graph is like it's categorized as a kota, but with very small urban density, as well as like a very small percentage of less than 50% of their villages are categorized urban. While on the other hand, and we call that as a rural kota or fake kotas. And on the other hand, we also have like an orange diamond on the right-hand side on the first quadrant, which are categorized as kabupaten, but have like a high urban density, high population density, as well as like or a high percentage, more than 50% of their villages categorized as urban. And we call it like fake kabupatens. Okay. We distributed the 93 kotas and 1,415 kabupatens into the 7 categories that we established and identified 10 large metropolitan kotas, mostly in Java, plus several provincial capitals of Java, such as Medan, Palembang, Surabaya is in Java, Kota Makassar, and then 16 metropolitan kotas, all in Western Indonesia and Kalimantan, and out of Java are like mostly provincial capitals again. 27 medium kotas. Here we start covering Eastern Indonesia. 16 small kotas, most of them are located outside Java. And 15, the so-called fake kabupatens. Most of them are in Java, all of them are in Java, and a lot of them are suburbs of like metropolitan areas, such as Kabupaten Tangerang, Kabupaten Sidoarjo, Kabupaten Bekasi, and so on. And then we also have like the 400 real rural kabupatens. Since this conference have like too many people talking about Jakarta, so Jakarta is excluded from the analysis, and not for that reason, but because like the characteristic is so outlier that will make things different. If we see the based on this definition, and we look, we see the population density. Based on district type and like percentage of urban village wards as expected, the more urbanized districts they have like higher population density and a higher percentage of urban villages. But when we talk, oh, when we see the population, things are not, the trend is not that simple. Fake kabupatens have like a population even like almost the same with the large metropolitan areas. And while rural kabupaten is actually in terms of population size is larger than fake kotas or small kotas. So it's the population size of this categorization doesn't really show like a positive trend with the level of urbanizations. Now, in the next few slides, I will talk about like development outcomes and public service outcomes a little bit. Here we reviewed like 3 development outcomes indicators, HDI, Human Development Index, poverty rate, and per capita regional gross domestic product. In general, we look at the 2016 data as a baseline. As expected, more urbanized areas have like better development outcomes when you see the 2016 data. However, if you look at the orange dots there, or orange circles in the 3 graphs, you can see that that is the improvement from the 2016 to 2022. And you can see that actually the more urbanized districts, types of districts, the progress is less than more rural areas. So this indicates like we hope that this can help into converging the development outcomes across districts in Indonesia. This is like like one critical juncture of our development, which is like COVID-19 like a few years ago, and we look at the development outcomes throughout the COVID period, and as you can see in the 3 graphs, it's basically what we see is like fake kabupatens, maybe driven by the suburbs of Jakarta, Surabaya, big cities, as well as large metropolitan areas are harder hit than the other types of urban districts during the COVID. And even like for the economic growth, actually larger quotas and fake kabupatens were very hardly hit, and makes like the development, the growth, the overall growth becomes less than the more rural districts. Lastly, on the public service, we pick 4 public service outcomes. One is school enrollment rate for 13 to 15 years old, SMP level, birth attended by professional workers, access to clear drinking water, as well as like access to proper sanitation. And here you can see like I think rural kabupatens are pretty much like way lower than the more urbanized districts, and in some cases, interestingly, rural fake quotas actually, just like an access to water and access to sanitation, also perform worse than the other types of urban districts. But one point here is also like large metropolitan quotas do not necessarily have like higher public service outcome performance compared to other types of districts. Now, in the next few slides, I will talk a bit about the budget, the local budget, and I will start with the revenue side. As you can see in the left graph, in general, large urban districts and fake kabupatens have lower per capita revenues than their rural counterparts. The revenues of all types of districts decreased in 2020 because of the pandemic, and in general have not reached the 2019 level yet. This is like per capita nominal value. The right graph shows the 3 main revenue sources for the districts: on-source revenue, OSR or PAD, transfers, and other revenues. And as you can see here, fake kabupaten and large metropolitan kota has significantly higher proportion of on-source revenue source contribution to its budget. And although Ed was expecting it's much higher than 30–40%, but that's the number that we have right now. And in the next slide, actually, the situation is even worse, because like of that relatively small own source revenue, OSR, actually the contribution of the local taxes and user charges is even smaller. Particularly in small kota and rural kabupaten, less than half of their PAD, their on source revenue, is sourced from local taxes and user charges. And if we compare the taxes, local taxes and user charges collected compared with the economy, you can see large metropolitan areas, large metropolitan kotas, as well as like fake kabupatens are able to collect like 1% of the RGDP annually, while more rural areas only can get like around 0.4% of the local GDP. Okay. I have to avoid touching this, so there is a quote once in a while. Okay, now we talk about like about the spending, the budget spending, and if you can see here, it's basically the spending by budget classification. The blue column is personnel, goods and services. The orange one, capital expenditure, is like the gray one, and transfers are the green columns. And as you can see here, transfer to village became the most differentiating factor between kota and kabupaten, because kabupaten has a responsibility to transfer 10% of their revenues to the villages. Now we try to, and if we try to remove that transfer to villages, what we see here is that both kabupaten and kota, regardless the size of the size of the cities and the level of urbanizations, have pretty similar spending patterns. So it's this. Although in general there is like a slightly different things. Rural districts spend more on capital expenditure. Large metropolitan kotas spend more on goods and services. But in general, the proportion is pretty much the same. And this will, since as we discussed earlier, per capita expenditures in larger kotas will be smaller because of the population size, as well as the kabupatens. This raise a question whether the per capita spending for the kota and larger population districts is adequate to provide services. Hopefully, the private sector can compensate that issue. Here we look at the distribution of the budget based on the economic functions, and we can see education, health, and general services, including government spending sectors, have been the most important spending with different prioritization. COVID-19 pandemic was responded by increasing spending on health and economic functions, including roads and irrigation infrastructure, while the spending for housing and public facility decreased. Education and general service functions remain relatively high. Such relatively uniform budget response across different types of urban districts doesn't reflect different levels of the pandemic and how local budgets are used to respond in different types of districts. A more detailed look at the functional spending shows that rural districts spend higher on general services. Kabupaten spend more on education, maybe driven by large population. Small quotas spend more on health functions, maybe due to limited private providers. And metropolitan and large metropolitan areas spend more for housing and public facility than other types of districts. Unfortunately, it's gone. So in general, yeah, I think one thing that I think, siapa the ibu siapa? The first, no, the first one.
Irene.
No. No, what I wanted to say is I think in general, if you can see the distribution of budget policy based on economic classification and economic functions, I think it's relatively rational. It's not. We cannot complain that local government spend irrationally in terms of local government spending. However, if you see, take a look at in more detail on the per capita expenditure on education, health, and economic spending between 2017 and 2021. There is no significant different spending policies in health, education, and economic functions among different types of quotas. So the only exception was education sector in several types of quotas decreased in 2021. This really indicates it's uniformity across types of districts, and temporal distribution is more significant rather than specific budget policy making at the district level. Last slide about the budget. I want to touch a bit about the concern. Please move. The concern of Indonesian development workers about the removal of 10% mandatory spending in the last omnibus law. In the last omnibus law. So previously I talked that due to the COVID-19, the health budget has been increased in terms of per capita and as well as per proportion of the total budget. And here I showed the numbers of districts that did not comply with the 10% mandatory spending. The good news is that it has been reduced from 83 in 2017 to only around 13 in 2021. So my health colleagues, I think you don't need to worry too much with this removal of the mandatory spending, and actually 13 is much better than the non-compliance of education sector, which is still in place. I think the data shows still 61 districts still not complied in the education sector. So to conclude, first is with definitely population density, proportion of urbanized areas and population have higher correlation with some budget and development characteristic rather than administrative classification of kabupaten and kota. Although asymmetric decentralization this is not asymmetric democratization that Jackie talked about earlier, just to make sure that I'm not promoting the things that Patito has been promoting. Asymmetric decentralization has been the public discourse for quite some time. Its implementation is still limited in special areas like Papua, Jakarta, Aceh, and so on. Central government policies, fiscal guidance, and assistance do not differentiate even between kabupaten and kota. Based on the development of public service outcome and the outcome, in general, more urbanized and larger districts perform better, or the latter have higher, the rural areas have higher improvement progress. But it's mostly most likely driven by diminishing rate of return rather than a very good budget allocation. Okay, higher population density and a proportion of urbanized village are highly correlated with contribution of local taxes And in addition to the higher economic activities, more dense development make it easier for local government to collect local taxes, more diversified economic activities, and also we found like several innovative local governments in these type of areas. With regards to spending, temporal spending pattern seems to be more important among urban district categories. And again, rural district to transfer to village is the main difference. And district population negatively correlated with per capita spending. In larger urban areas, I think we can hope that private sector can compensate that, but in the smaller urban areas, we may have like a better policy. Finally, the policy implication, again, is the asymmetric decentralization, not democratization, complementing administrative classification with other urban characteristics, and also differentiate policies based on different characteristics. Distribution of on authorities, can we give like authority of secondary education to several large metropolitan? Fiscal policies, can we compensate low tax ratio in several urban districts with transfers? And then which local governments that the government needs to intensively monitor? And lastly, different the development policy to be applied to, based on different characteristics. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mustafa and Erman. And we now have the Q&A session. I will open the first round of questions to 3 questions from the in-person audience. And please be brief and also mention to whom you direct your questions. Ferdi, the gentleman on the behind, and then Joyce, lady on behind in the gray turtleneck, and Clara.
That's okay. I would like to direct my question to Mr. Mustafa. I'm interested about you explained about the power of civic society to improve the condition of Surabaya, but my question is there any specific cultural factors, or is it like some sort of like historical artifacts from the past that would lead towards this particular characteristic of the Surabaya people? That's my question. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Joyce. I'm from ANU. So my question is something to do with more of the sustainability. So I understand that efforts for reform, especially the goal of increasing civic engagement at the local level, may have varied results depending on local political context. Based on your analysis of the 3 cases that you've presented, setting aside the agency component, just to focus more on the institutional arrangements or maybe formal or informal local structures that can be attributed to more sustained reform that encourages better civic participation. Oh, sorry, it's for Mustafa.
My question is for Mustafa, so I don't know. I'm sorry, Mas Erman. So I think there is one missing element from your typology. It is active civil society and non-progressive, non-reformist leader. For example, the case in Jakarta right now with the caretaker. I wonder if you can comment on that, and how are we going to sustain the progress with the cyclical electoral policies and the leadership elite configurations that we have now? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Ferdi. Surabaya has been known like culturally, and maybe there is like a good book written by Dick about Surabaya vibrancy, something like that. It's the anthropological. That Surabaya civil society is like bold community. They can tell anything that they want. They ask. I've been like part of the rebellion against Mataram since the kingdom area, and like 10 November, for example, in the Independence Day. They have been like the vibrancy is like part of the city for a long time. So that is like, we call it Surabaya's bonek, right? They can do anything. They can, if they want, they want. So that's thing also. But this one is like make a pressure for the leadership to have to perform. This is kind of something that we need for the leadership to have to do something. So yes, the answer is yes. The institutional arrangement, with the logic of my presentation, actually, at the end, in the case of Surabaya, again, it is the presence of strong civil society that make anything sustain. Because they will continue find out new leadership. They even make Risma win. They even like make in the last election, there is Surabaya is now led by Eri Cahyadi, who was like known as the part of the Risma's team in the reform era. Civil society working with this mayor candidate to win, and then wins like a lot, like 60% for the winning. So meaning that when civil society is vibrant, they can actually by themselves supporting other institutions or local leaders. This is also happening in Bogor right now. Even though in Bogor, I thought that corruption and clientelism is still there, the mayor closeness with the civil society right now create a sense of the importance of city to deliver, the importance of the governments to deliver. This is now, if you see there is like a lot of vibrancy now growing, but still in the sense of service delivery. But give like when the mayors left out, there have been like increasing awareness that we need next mayor to deliver as well, like Bima, even though still in the service delivery context. Yeah. So to Clara, missing, yes, I do not have yet a situation where civil society is very strong, but the leadership is predatory. I have, but we'll find out that maybe become interesting. But there is a case in the early 2000 in the early reformasi in Surabaya case. When reformasi happened, the critical conjuncture happened. Surabaya is continued the leadership of military background of mayor. But Surabaya civil society working in 2 years do demonstration to force the DPRD to impeach this mayor. And then from that become the critical conjuncture. Meaning that as long as civil society is strong there, they can become a pressure, and can negotiate at least an improvement of the good governance. I think that's all. No more, please.
Do we have questions online?
So we have 2 questions online, one for Pak Mustafa and one for Pak Erman. So don't worry. For Pak Mustafa, we have a question from Budi Hernawan from STF Jakarta. Sorry. You picked 3 cities in Java. Do you also argue that your analysis is applicable outside of Java? If so, how do you justify your arguments? And then for Pak Erman, we have from Owen Potger from Sumba Timur, NTT, Indonesia. With the new law, the AK is focused on regions not reaching SPM. But there is no SPM for major transport infrastructures in large cities. What should be done?
That's for Erman. Can you repeat the question again?
Okay, sorry. For the second question, for Pak Erman, with the new law, the AK is focused on regions not reaching SPM. But there is no SPM for major transport infrastructures in large cities. What should be done? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mas Budi Hernawan. It's a good question. Because we talk about the political landscape, it is very much contextualized. We cannot generalize things. But the 3 cases that I put is actually extreme one. Surabaya, which is very extreme one, South Tangerang is very extreme one, and the middle one is like the one in the middle, somewhere in the middle is in the city. But there is a lot of nuance in between, so we cannot really use it to generalize all the things.
I haven't finished thinking. No, that's based on Blaine. Maybe you can be my friend to call and ask like whether. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But my understanding is that the new law on fiscal balance between central and local governments, indeed like have like SPM, the minimum service standard. I hope that is the question. Minimum service standard as an indicator to determine the transfer. That was indicated, but my understanding is that it is for allocating the DAU, the general grants, not the DAK. Yeah. So and the fact, although that shows like how important the minimum service standards to the future transfers, but up until 2024. My understanding is that policy has not been applied yet, because I think the issue raised in this previous session, again, like about the data of the SPM is not readily available and with like adequate reliability. So that's the issue. But on the DAK, our understanding is that for DAK Fisik, it is more like on the proposal from the subnational governments that can be biased with the higher capacity of like a local government submitting proposals that will benefit more on urban more urbanized areas.
I think we still have 5 more minutes. The second round. Oh my God. All right. Rwandi, one, and then in the middle, the lady in the black jilbab, and it's so difficult. All right, the one that's doing this. Thank you. Name, please.
Halo, terima kasih kesempatannya. My name is Riandi. I'm a student at the ANU. Just quick question for Pak Mustafa. Is it the case of civil society pressure or the leader wanting to do good? Because since Jokowi, he opens the door that if you do good as a mayor, you can become governor and you can become a president. So is it that case or civil society? And also because some of the good leaders are in the spotlight, right? Is it Bogor, Tangsel, not so much because sense of belonging very low, but not let alone Depok. No one has a sense of belonging in Depok. But is it the case of civil society or they really want to do good, like it is in their interest really, that they have to do good, they have to deliver because maybe sometimes I can become a president.
Check. Okay. Hi, my name is Vidi. I'm G20 scholars from University of Melbourne. My question is for both of the speakers. Pak, do you think Indonesia still have decentralization in a like local government still have their authority, particularly after the establishments of the government regulation, peraturan Permendagri, number 90 2019 about the program. So all the local governments, kabupaten, kota, they can't propose any program outside what is already listed on this Permendagri. Do you think the local leaders like Pak Bimo Arya still have the authority to propose the program to develop the region? Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Yudis from Universitas Indonesia. My question is for Pak Erman Rahman. So, given your study on financing or source of revenue, is there any innovative on source revenue that you may suggest to small kota or even rural kabupaten? Thank you.
Okay. Well, you are thinking, I answer first. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Rian. It is the case of civil society that doing good or leadership, right? See the context that democratic decentralization, if you are a leader, you cannot do whatever you want. Because there around you is predatory elite that want to influence you. You have to fight against them. And only if you have good civil society, strong civil society, so you can do something to against them. So it's not who are important, but the combination of those is important. Unless you have to compromise to one reform on this area that predatory is not interested, but not in there. So that's the situation. So I think the combination of both is very important. Do the cities still have authority? I cannot answer it unless Erman first explain it. Because he is my lecturer on this one. So sekalian Pak, waktunya terbatas.
Okay, I think like I forgot this morning speaker, Jackie was talking about like a recentralization, this recentralization, yeah. But I don't think this Permendagri, if I understand, I understand you correctly, this is like about the classification of the budget, the 6,000 page guidelines for the budget that you are referring to, right? Indicators of what? Oh, for the report? No, sorry, I don't remember the numbers. So is it like for the EPP, the report, the local government report, or the nomenclatures of the budget? Nomenclatures of the budgets. I mean, like, I think it's more like from the accounting perspective. It's like basically to be able to consolidate all the budget, all the local budgets that they have like to be classified into like a standardized budget. I mean, we can have like a debate about it, but I think the recentralization, spirit is real. It's not, I mean, like, it's like basically the new law on fiscal transfer. Definitely now we have like even the general allocation grants have like a specific DAU, Bu Masita? Is it like a specific DAU? So the fiscal discretion, the discretion of local government to be able to use based on their own thinking, regardless right or wrong, is like now smaller, and also like I think there was like a question regarding the omnibus law on the employment creation regarding the environmental that Acho was like criticized about, right? And it's like for example in omnibus law, for instance, the spatial plans, which we may, I mean, like the local spatial plans can be overruled by central government for the sake of the central government priorities. I mean, like, yeah, to me, those are the things that reflecting more decentralization rather than the budget classification. And then the innovation of the OSR, yep, there are several things that we work with several kabupatens and kota that have that kind of innovations. I think one is in South Sulawesi, and this is Bang Sulsel collaborate with Acho, Kota Makassar, in Kota Makassar, Bang Sulsel like collaborates with the local government to collect to have like an equipment to be able to collect the local taxes better, and they double or triple their revenue collection from that one. Interestingly, in Sumeneb, like Bank Jatim, again like a local bank, like has a collaboration with BUMDes, with like a village companies, to collect both BPJS premium, the health insurance premium, as well as the collection of PBB, the local land and property taxes, through through the BUMDes. So it's like decentralizing the revenue collection further, just to name a few of the innovations in revenue collections. Thank you.
Thank you for the response, and thank you, audience, for your great questions. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and that concludes this session 3 discussion. I would like just to reiterate our sincere thanks to our speakers, Mustafa and Erman, and I think all of the audience agree that it has been a very fun and fascinating discussions, looking at how the cities or urban areas can have different characteristics in terms of the local politics, progressiveness of the civil societies, and also the development and local financial capacities and challenges that are equally important in affecting the public service reforms and outcomes. Thank you, audience, and please remain seated because we will directly continue to the next session. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. We will start in a second, but welcome to today's last session on the politics of urban land and relocation. I think this is a very interesting session, especially in relation to what happened recently in Pulau Rempang. Yeah? But first of all, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Rini Astuti, research fellow at the ANU College of Science. And I would like to thank you to all of you audience. You are outstanding audience because you stay until the last. Yeah? And I promise you that you will be rewarded with 2 excellent presentations from Elisa Sutanudjaja and Clara Siagian. So Elisa is a prominent scholar activist and the executive director of Rujak Center of Urban Studies in Jakarta. And Clara here is our model PhD student at the Crawford School ANU. So without further ado, let me call on Elisa first. Thanks.
Okay. Oops. Yeah, it's loud noise. Okay, thank you Indonesia Update for inviting me, especially Pak Ed and Kalinda. Where are you, Kalinda? Ah, there, yeah. Again, this event allow me to share about urban poor collective resistance in claiming housing rights. So I come from Jakarta, the largest city in Indonesia with a population of 10.4 million people. Jakarta has been widely known for its traffic jam and currently for its air pollution, for sure you know, and among urban poor forced evictions. Indonesia is the country where 99% of housing actually is provided by the people. And as Jakarta citizen, I have witnessed several forced evictions within the last 8 years, including this one. In the morning of 11 April 2016, located in the district called Pasar Ikan and Kampung Aquarium of North Jakarta. The pictures itself show us an empty barricade street, police and military presence, and some family being ushered to the school bus. And this is what happened behind. The government bulldozer only need a half a day to demolish a kampung kota or urban kampung that has been built by around 2,000 people over the past 50 years. So what is a kampung kota or urban kampung anyway? So it is a socially produced and non-market high-density settlement that located in strategic area. Many scholars try to make sense of it, including Abdul Malik Simon, and I personally like how Pak Abidin Kusno used the term of de facto and irregular settlement when describing kampung kota. Internationally, it is also recognized as social production of habitat. However, in the eyes of government, kampung kota is equal to slums. So thanks God that Pak Abidin already explained it, so I don't really need to explain about this, but this green indicating how persis Kampung Kota already exists since colonial time until today. So the transportation network map here, combined with green color indicating kampung, is another example about the strategicness and closeness of Kampung Kota within urban Jakarta. However, from colonial times until today, kampungs are always under threat due to these challenges. One is modernization as a narrative for city progress, see kampung as unfit to Jakarta or as a global city. And at the same time, kampungs also seen as attractive site for modernizing the city and as profitable sites for investment. These are also nuanced talk about kampungs loaded with prejudice like the article on the below, and stigma about the slum, represent them in derogatory and ways such characterized by filth, dirt, prostitution, malicious, disease, and etc. And about 40% of kampung's land status is unregistered, which is made kampung prone to agrarian conflict and easily claimed by private and government and then lead to forced eviction. Kampung is always on the margin from the perspective of land use and zoning regulation. Their existence is easily ignored and considered as empty land and represented from the mismatch between Kampung Kerang Ijo here of Muara Angke in Jakarta detailed plan, where some of the kampung area are on the water if we strictly follow the land use. And at the same time, kampung also provides affordable housing, especially for migrants who first come to Jakarta from student to blue-collar workers and made it become more population density. And however, if we look into land use regulation, the floor area ratio in kampungs are less than 2 sometimes, meaning that the building cannot go higher than 3 or 4 floors. The mismatch between high population density and low floor area ratio leads to overcrowding condition that transform kampung into slum condition. So do all these kind of challenges facing by kampung, it could easily make kampung as a target of forced eviction, mostly to make way of flood infrastructure, providing green space, and in the name of civic order. So despite Indonesia already acknowledged right to adequate housing through our constitution and has ratified International Convention on Social, Economic, and Cultural Rights back in the 2005, eviction is always part of Jakarta's history until today. From colonial time until today, during Suharto time, during some previous governors of Jakarta, including like Sutioso. However, in recent years, under the administration of Basuki Purnama or Ahok, has been dubbed the largest series of eviction in Jakarta history according to Jakarta Legal Aid, with total 305 forced eviction within 2015 to 2016. So, oops. I think it's skip. Next. Sorry. So I'm in debt from of our former intern from University of Sydney, Lea Emmanuel, for identifying, structuring, and articulating the urban poor movement and respond toward forced eviction, which include their network and also using everyday practice, organizing, and tactics of resistance deployed by various groups, and how this practice also reproduce people involvement in claiming their housing right. The tactics are pretty diverse, from legal battle to cultural activity, knowledge co-production, and building alliance. So I will try to explain these tactics from the perspective of Kampung Aquarium. So the first tactic is called holding our ground, which is continuing to live and or rebuilding kampung despite having been demolished. For example, in Kampung Aquarium, some residents return to their kampung and rebuild their life from scratch after a month after the forced eviction. And because of this, Kampung Aquarium managed to maintain their community ties and also have this gotong royong also happening and easier to organize in one place. The next one is called tactic preemptive transformation, which is about making changes that may prevent potential eviction. This comes in many different forms, But for Kampung Aquarium case, it's kind of like developing an alternative nicely designed of the new kampung. So this design process also provides an opportunity and become an organizing tool among urban poor. So since kampung are sometimes considered illegal and informal settlements, it is important to pursue legal avenues to challenge eviction, especially from the perspective of human rights and rights to adequate housing. Kampung Aquarium sued the government back in 2018 in the court with Jakarta Legal Aid Act as their lawyer. So in their kampung networking has been important for creating solidarity ties and providing moral and material support to other kampung across the city over the years. So this network also become their tactics to survive in the city. So for example, residents from Kampung Aquarium the other day also went provide moral support to Kampung Bayam, which is got evicted in 2021. But what is important in this current context, this inter-kampung networking has become vital in the lead up to the gubernatorial election in 2017 and the opportunity it represents for influencing future urban policy regarding eviction. The kampung also create external partnership, building coalition and collaboration with NGOs and communities, and even with political party and religious organizations. The nature of this partnership is sometimes very pragmatic, and the collaborators and partners are very diverse. And for the Kampung Aquarium case, you see the infamous FBI, Jakarta Legal Aid, political party Gerindra, Rujak, my organization, Urban Poor Consortium on the same table working on the different means. So we also doing a I think I missed one slide here, but anyway. There's something wrong with the current, okay. Anyway, so we also do multi-layer advocacy, meaning on international level, regional and local level. For example, Rujak invited the UN Special Rapporteur on Right to Adequate Housing, Lila back in September 2016, which gained international exposure in her report as well as in national media coverage. So legitimation tactics encompass a various strategy. Usually it's more like raising awareness and recognition, but also looking outward and using indirect channels of soft power. It could be featured in the documentaries like Jakarta Unfair, which is released and aired during Jakarta election campaign in 2017. It could be a cultural diplomacy with international artists, like with Japanese artists on the right side. So the kampung also become a learning site. For example, this international field school in Kampung Aquarium, and also taking part of knowledge co-production through various researchers from scholars, thesis and dissertation from students. So this resistance also need momentum and sometimes luck. So we kind of like lucky this time. So the time where Orang Cilik evicted by government met local election cycle, which incentivized the urban poor to organize and resist. So in the eve of Jakarta election in 2017, there were three notable urban poor resistance movements that in favor on one candidate, in this case, organizing political contract with Anies Baswedan. I will be focusing on the resistance movement where Rujak actively taking part of, which is the red one. And this is the resistance together with Jakarta Urban Poor Network, or JRMK, and Urban Poor Consortium, or UPC. And this network is heavily concentrated in North Jakarta with some fringe in the West and East Jakarta. So Jakarta Urban Poor Network consists of 25 kampung, 3 street vendors association, 3 social housing, and 16 pedicab drivers and association. So this is not the first political contract conducted by Jakarta Urban Poor. Their first political contract was in 2012 with Jokowi, but none of the contract being fulfilled by Jokowi before he left his post for presidency. So we learned a lot from our past mistake and made more thorough and more organized contract when the Urban Poor Network signed a political contract with Anies Baswedan 3 days before 2017 election day. So after Anies won the election, The urban poor have become more active and friendlier towards the city in the city hall. Within the first 3 months of Anies governorship, there are several progressive policy implemented, advocated by the urban poor, which is the construction of temporary shelters of kampung aquariums and other affected kampungs, and the launching of citywide community action plan program, or CAP. So the launching of CAP actually was originally Jakarta Urban Poor Network event, but then it was fully adopted by provincial government as official event. So starting from political contract with 25 kampungs, now community action program has benefit, until today, has benefit 220 neighborhoods citywide. So by having this political contract, urban poor and kampung residents have a once-in-a-lifetime chance to address and overcome challenges facing by kampung. The CAP program putting people at the center of planning rather than a top-down typical spatial planning practices. In 2019, the provincial government also agreed to launch urban agrarian reform program trying to solve agrarian uncertainty in kampung. Combined with Kampung Susun and vertical kampung, the agrarian reform is trying to modernize and densify the kampungs properly and led by the residents. So Kampung Susun itself is become a form of design and planning resistant against a top-down one-size-fits-for-all housing solution for urban poor like Rusun Nawa or public rental flats. Kampung Susun is designated to adapt kampung lifestyle and its economic activity, and this is a community-led process. So the formation of Kampung Susun production share the same narrative with social production of habitat as being stated in the new urban agenda. So social habitat begins from the conceptualization of housing and habitat as a process, not as a finished product, as a social and cultural product, and not as a merchandise, and as the act of inhabiting and not a mere object of exchange. This is also a long-going advocacy by Latin America, I think by Latin America civil society. It varies level of social participation in the diverse housing production pace, including within the planning, construction, distribution, and use. So I will explain more through our experience in building Kampung Susun on the next slide. So as the continuation of Kampung Aquarium resistance movement that led it to the political contract and community action planning in 2019, Kampung Aquarium entering into another resistance to realizing their housing right, which is building back their kampung. Well, within the 5 years, Kampung Aquarium has undergone tremendous change from ruination after post-eviction through shelter life in 2018 to Kampung Susun in 2021. So while public housing design tends to be top-down approach without resident involvement, Kampung Susun has a robust co-design process. It looks messy somehow in the process, but it saves time after we finalize building, and it serves as a conflict resolution among residents and rebuild sense of community after being demolished through forced eviction. So the provincial government also actively participate within the design process. So this process also serves as a middle ground between the government and the residents. And the making of Kampung Susun is also very democratic and inclusive. For example, when the designated unit is not based by the lottery or money, it is based by your health condition and age. So the ground floor unit is designated for people with health problem and old people. So Kampung Susun Aquarium also another equitable, I think the only equitable example of public-private partnership, which is led by the residents. So built through the infrastructure levy from the developer, so the money coming from the developer, they're the one who built it, and at the same time shaping some new progressive policy in urban governance, such as urban agrarian reform and also cooperative housing. So Kampung Susun Aquarium practice also continue and become a model. It's not a best practice, but only a model for other 3 affected kampungs in rebuilding process, which is including Kampung Kunir, Kampung Susun Jakung, formerly Bukit Duri residents, and also Kampung Susun Bayam. Kampung Susun also involve a process of commoning where the building it will be managed and currently managed and operated by residents through housing co-op. The land still belongs to the public and the building ownership will be transferred to housing co-op within 5 years. The residents has empowered themselves to negotiate their term with the government. So I am honored to be actively involved in this process over the past 8 years. So here's my reflection. About the resistance itself, the collective resistance tactics are indeed interconnected and interdependent, often used in combination with each other at different points in time and different places. What works in Kampung Aquarium probably have different turnout in Kampung Bayam. Kampungs are not homogeneous. Many has different interests, different diverse winners and losers, different ideas about what should be done and how, which is sometimes led to conflict. Key message to it is not just about rejecting efficient, but about defending a particular way of life, access to the city, and a sense of community, as mentioned many times by Kampung Aquarium community leader, Ibu Darmandiani. We just want our kampung back. We don't want money or compensation. So the production of Kampung Susun itself has become another collective resistance towards typical top-down public housing practice in Jakarta and in Indonesia in general, where each resident has been actively taking part designing, producing, and managing Kampung Susun. It also provides people narrative towards being modern in urban setting. Therefore, I would like to borrow Pak Abedin Kusno term. Kampung Susun could also serve as middling strategy for urban poor to realize their housing right in modern times and with dignity. So we are currently benefiting and taking advantage from the success story of Kampung Susun. The success story allows us to have ongoing and strong advocacy towards national government. The Kampung Susun frequently become sites of training and visit in collaboration with Ministry of Development Planning. The Kampung success story also led to another ongoing collaboration with National Land Agency to the first land consolidation program in Kampung Muara Angke, North Jakarta. Kampung Susun also inspire Kampung residents that equitable modernization in the city is possible. And I would like to use this opportunity to show gratitude to anyone to taking active part in the urban resistance, especially in Kampung Susun movement, including all the community architects, the housing cooperative, and all the scholars, the fellow activists that we met and collaborate along the way. And following from Sonia's presentation about urban planning, if you want to know more about Kampung Aquarium planning process, there's a very nice chapter written by our community architect in her edited new book called in Handbook of Urban Indonesia, right? And the chapter called Participation within the Insurgent Planning Practice, a case of Kampung Susun Aquarium. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you for organizers, volunteers, and sign language interpreters working in the background. Thank you for Indonesian project and the convener for giving me the enviable task of being the last presentations that separates you from Canberra's exciting Friday night live scene in Moosehead. So I'll see you there maybe. But because my presentations touch upon the issues of land, it's just crucial for me to start by acknowledging the Ngunawal and Ngamri people, traditional custodians of the land on which we gather today, and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people joining us here today or online. So I won't be laboring with the evictions because Elisa already covered it, but I just want to reiterate that 17,000 households, approximately, was removed from Kampung between 2013 to 2018. And this covers the period of Jokowi, Ahok, Jarot, and a little bit of Anies. So Kampung eviction is seen as is met with strong resistance and criticisms, is seen as an attack against the urban poor, the violations against their right to housing and right to the city. So, this is Ahok. saying that they are going to relocate evicted residents to Rusunawa. Rental social housing or Rumah Susun Sederhana Sewa, Rusunawa, emerged into the public debate as the countermeasurement against these condemnations. Rusunawa is presented not only as a way to fulfill the residents' rights to housing, but as an improvement to their lives. With its orderly visual, uniform units, clean and decluttered look, it is presented as a much better shelter than the popular portrayal of dilapidated, disorganized housing by Trash-Choke Ciliwung River. My study investigates this claim. Based on an ethnographic fieldwork in the 3 Rusunawa in Jakarta between 2019 to 2021, I posed 2 arguments. First, instead of improving their lives, Rusunawa entraps the residents in a life characterized with a deep precarity and protracted uncertainty. As a temporary housing, Rusunawa fails to become the launching pad for the residents to move out of and on to more secured forms of housing, as envisioned by the government. Not only does the eviction strip people of their major assets and livelihood base, their rental scheme puts them in a downward spiral of debt that they find impossible to escape. Furthermore, the prolonged impermanence creates a sense of anxiety that undermines their ability and desire to make Rusunawa homes. As a result, both the residents and the government are locked in a stalemate where they can't find a way to move out of. I will start by painting a general picture of housing situation in Indonesia where Rusunawa is positioned, describe what Rusunawa is in the context of kampung eviction in Jakarta. Then I will explain what I mean by impasse in this title. Next, I will chronicle the experience of living in Rusunawa from the point of view of the evicted residents, what renting in Rusunawa means for them, and the kind of feeling and tensions coming out of this experience. Lastly, I will discuss briefly some of the solutions being discussed and circulated among the policymakers and also the residents out of this gridlock. So numbers. I guess there are some repeated numbers there, but I want to reiterate that there are at least 30 million households living in inadequate house in Indonesia. So there's a backlog of almost 13 million housing. On top of these figures, each year, it is estimated that Indonesia will need 780,000 houses to 1.3 million until 2045. But the housing only constitute, like Mas Erman presentations, around 2% of government expenditure as of now. This issue will even be more acutely felt with 70% Indonesians predicted to live in urban areas by 2045. But the current trend, subsidized housing, 57% are located in rural areas. In Surabaya, 99% of subsidized housing located more than 10 kilometers away from the city center. While the government introduced a variety of subsidy package for housing, studies have shown that there's huge vertical inequality in access to housing subsidy. So simply put it, the more expensive the house, the more portions of the price would be subsidized by the government. Now let's zoom into Jakarta. The latest official statistic estimate 4.4% out of 10 million something Jakartans are poor, which is around 95,000 individuals. Yet, as we all know, the calorie-based poverty line in Indonesia is set extremely and notoriously low. In Jakarta, this translates to roughly 80 Australian dollar per person per month. A study by Compass, though, in 2021 finds that the average price of a landed house of 30 square meter in Jakarta is more than ₹500 million. For average household in Jakarta's minimum wage, and this would be the precariously non-poor that Jackie explained before, they could only reasonably buy a house around 160 to 200 million rupiah, which means a small house within 30 to 50 kilometers away from the center. So Rusunawa comes into the picture as a kind of temporary stopgap for housing, mostly targeted for poor household, masyarakat berpenghasilan rendah atau MBR, especially in urban areas. But what is Rusunawa exactly? So it is a social housing rental scheme typically owned and managed by the government, either the national or subnational. While my study looks at Rusunawa in Jakarta, it is built and operated in many cities, Makassar, Surabaya, Medan, Batam, Mataram, and among others. In Jakarta, they are typically mid to high-rise apartment complex, 5 to 16 floors. They are meant to house residents of Jakarta from low-income background. Some of them are poor, but most of them are vulnerable or aspiring or anxious middle class. They are equipped with cleaning services, around-the-clock security, engineers, electricians. There are around 2,600 contract workers in whole Rusunawa, Jakarta. Aside from residents of certain level of income, Rusunawa also hosts evicted household in Jakarta from Kampung, officially called warga terprogram or program tenants. As a program tenants, they are given additional rent subsidy. So their rent is around 150,000 rupiah to 300,000 rupiah per month, excluding utilities. The units are small, typically 30 square meter. So there are a total of 35 Rusunawa complexes and 29,235 units in all Jakarta, according to the latest figure in Housing Department website. And these units are highly sought after. For example, there are only 600 units currently vacant. These are the ones owned and operated by the provincial government. There are other Rusun, a few of them, operated by Yayasan and by national government. So the provincial government envisions Rusunawa to serve as a kind of incubator, where the evicted residents would be provided with support to improve their economic status and graduate from Rusunawa, ready to progress to the next step in their housing career, like this one. So Rusunawa, and then Rusunami is house owner-occupier flats, vertical flats, and then after that they would move on to market. Not only they get heavily subsidized rent, but they are also entitled to additional in-kind assistance on top of basic social welfare like family hope programs or Kartu Jakarta Pintar. The government also organizes entrepreneurial and vocational skill training like aircon repair, cooking, handicraft, batik workshop. The idea is the residents would be able to use these skills to start a profitable small business, save up money, and move on to the next housing step. The concept of graduation in Rusunawa echoes the similar model found in cash transfer program, including family hope program of PKH. According to this model, after some years, receiving the generous cash transfer, the beneficiary will be able to exit the program and live without depending on the government support. This model, though, has been criticized, among others, for assuming a linear trajectory out of poverty and for underestimating the role of structures and macroeconomic factors in pushing people back to poverty. So in Rusunawa, the management who runs the place also think that it is their task to educate the residents, like dispensing parenting advice, or to provide pastoral care to the evicted resident, as expressed here by the staff. The temporariness is evident in the phrase boarding, a cause, and while the government is seen as a protective and caring mother, matrons or ibukos, Rusunawa is often also treated as a panti social institutions where the poor and the vulnerable are being cared and disciplined simultaneously. But despite receiving this caring and intervention for 6 to 10 years, there is little sign that the program has improved the life of evicted residents, let alone help them to graduate from Rusunawa. Instead, Rusunawas are afflicted with huge arrears. The latest number shows that in June 2020, the debt reached 71.2 billion rupiah, or 7.1 million US dollar. So what is happening in Rusunawa? Okay, let's start with eviction. Eviction is primarily a material disposition. The residents are stripped of their lands and houses, perhaps the only major assets they could have in their lifetime. In Kampung, these houses serve as their primary source of income from rooms they rented out, or kiosks or cottage industry they operated. People benefit from the density of Kampung as their consumer base or source of information or jobs, opportunities, and economic speculations. Furthermore, Kampung is usually close to major economic hubs, which mean more income-generating opportunities. Therefore, the relocation to gated Rusunawa on the outskirts of the city is experienced as further impoverishment. I mentioned before that in Rusunawa there are vocational workshops. They call empowerment, organized for the residents. However, in my observations, these programs were conducted in piecemeal manner with little to no follow-up. The workshops are small in size, only 20 residents as participants at one time, for example. They only focus on skill provisions without further support in terms of capital, supervision, marketing, and consistent coaching. Yet the management assigned the fault to the resident for not working hard enough, for their kampung mentality, going back to the mental revolutions, defined as a lack of grit, perseverance, and industriousness. Given the expensive cost of running Rusunawa, the program residents are deemed undeserving for the lack of the commitment and efforts to pay the rent. Units in Rusunawa should have instead be given to more deserving Jakartans, according to the officials. Noted here that deserving does not only define based on needs, but also on how grateful and disciplined the residents are in paying the rent. Even so, the management complained that they couldn't evict the program residents. This move is still considered a politically risky step. For the residents, as this quote shows, having to pay the rent for their houses signify a loss of control or a sense of alienation from a very personal part of their lives, home. This is especially prominent among men who often tie their masculinity to their ability to provide shelter and to pass on tangible assets to their children. Thus, eviction and relocation to Rusunawa also produce a sense of indignation and anger for the fact that the state demolished their houses without any restitutions. Both the management and the residents understand that this resentment, this anger, or so-called dendam, contribute to their refusal to pay rent, as this quote, "Now we are trapped and tricked, the government too. You didn't pay for my house, so why should I bother to pay for yours?" If rent symbolizes the loss of control, not paying rent offers a way to regain some of this control. The loss of control over their homes reminds the residents that they live in a temporary shelter. The phrase lodging in the government's house or menumpang di rumah pemerintah is a phrase I frequently hear from the residents. This is something that the management is also keen on emphasizing, actually. This phrase expresses an acute awareness that Rusunawa will only end in another dislocation. There is a legal ground for these notions. The gubernatorial decree on Rusunawa limits the tenancy for evicted residents for a maximum of 6 years. So there is this haunting sense of imminent finality to their current settlement, of which the residents have no way of knowing or controlling. This situation produces a specific structure of feeling among the residents, which I call residential anxiety. Residential anxiety is a generalized restlessness emerged out of a dire housing precarity. And the experience of evictions only serves to bolster this sense of powerlessness. While people are trying to find an exit plan, in the meantime, the residential anxiety undercuts any attempt or even desire to build a community in Rusunawa. Why bother, says informants, if we're going to leave this place anyway? So people express doubt over the value of investing time and efforts in creating a sense of communal belonging in Rusunawa. The feeling that the settlement could end any time is further reinforced by the regulatory void, in regards to what the government would do now that most program residents either had already passed their tenancy limit or are approaching it. This legal vacuum creates a looming fear, and the residents interpret several managerial moves as tactic to evict program tenants one unit at a time. The vagaries of evictions, impoverishment, and the residents' anxiety in Rusunawa intensifies the nostalgia, the yearning for kampung, as illustrated by the upcoming quotes. Kampung reappears as an ideal home, and relocation to Rusunawa is experienced as a regression instead of improvement. One says he cannot move on from kampung, and another informant declared that he belongs to the land. Kampung is kampung halaman. As Emily Hertzman noted, kampung halaman is much more than a familiar physical landscape, but also, in a quote, a social space in which one's understanding of the world is shared and valued by others, end of quote. That kampung is where their ari-ari or umbilical cords were buried is a frequent remark I heard to explain the yearning for kampung. This phrase seems to mean that their connection to kampung is more than nostalgic, but also corporeal and spiritual. Well, since everyone seems to understand the situations of impasse, I asked residents, management, and provincial level officials their thoughts and plans to move past this impasse. The officials like to reiterate the zero down payment scheme as the next affordable step, but all my informants understand that no bank would want to loan their mortgage due to their informal livelihood and their low and erratic income. Given the impossibility of this alternative, some managements see that faithful enforcement of the tenancy limit is the only way to fiscally save Rusunawa. But this will only create even a dire situations of homelessness. Given the strong emotional, social, and economic attachment to kampung, most would end up moving somewhere close to their original settlements. However, this time around, they will be in a more precarious and deprived conditions, having lost all their assets and having to pay even more expensive rent in kampung. Another idea that is frequently raised is debt relief. Well, this might provide reprieve to many residents, but without delicate arrangement, this would anger a small number of residents who tried to keep up with the rent. This alternative also doesn't solve the principal issue of rent. What happens next after debts are forgiven? Another one is monetary compensation, something that many residents still insist on getting. They argue that with enough money, they'd be able to find a patch somewhere, build another house, finally live independent of the government support, as the state wishes anyway. Finally, there's this model of self-governed Rusunawa that has been experimented in several kampung, just like Elisa presented before. When I brought up this option to the residents, their opinion varied. While some view it as a feasible alternative, others are not too optimistic about it. Not only they question their capacity to manage, but also they are aware that without government subsidy, they would have to pay more for Rusunawa operations, while the Rusunawa cannot become a viable economic base. Rusunawa is simply a much more unsustainable housing option for some of the residents. To conclude, yes, I want to reiterate some 4 points before concluding this presentation. Housing, especially for the poor, precarious, and anxious, low-income, non-poor, the urban majority, would become more critical for Indonesian cities. Rusunawa was intended to become one of the solutions. But instead, Rusunawa has become a place of prolonged stagnance where the residents are being held in a limbo without the ability nor the desire to make it home. There are several possible solutions to this impasse. None of them on its own would satisfy everyone. The pathway forward is likely to involve several measures altogether. The solution for one resident would look different to the next one. The key, however, is to start formulating this alternative in close and respectful conversations with the residents and with a commitment to treat housing as a human right. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you to our 2 excellent presenters, Mbak Elisa and Clara. So we now have around 18 minutes for questions and answers. In the interest of time, please state your question concisely and please state who you address your questions to. Yeah, the gentleman in the back with the blue shirt. And then from, I think that gentleman already asked questions, so maybe that gentleman over there, yeah. with gray suit. Okay, and then, okay, yeah. Okay, you can ask question anyway, yeah, because we need 3 questions for the first session. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, please.
Thank you, Mbak Rini. Thank you, Mbak Elisa and Clara. Hi, Mbak Elisa. I'm Asrul, PhD student at ENU. So, Mbak Elisa took me to Kampung Aquarium back in 2017 in Jakarta. So, I agree with you with your statement that no one size fit all, and then Kampung itself is not homogeneous. Yeah? But with the state regulation, sometimes they have very rigid regulation with national standard, with special planning mentioning that after you have provincial special planning, in next 2 years you have like district special planning, and at latest the next 2 years you have to detail special planning. So with this kind of limitation of time, and with any rigid standard like density, floor density, how do you see that this kind of community planning which needs more time, because even Kampung itself not homogeneous, how do you see this kind of approach has been incorporated into the state regulation? How can it be incorporated, because of there is trade-off with time and so on. This also related to Clara itself, because you say...
Sorry, Pak Asrul, just one question, please.
Thank you.
Yeah, Bapak in gray suit, please.
Terima kasih, saya Zulfan from Western Sydney University. To Ibu Mbak Clara, it seems like Rusunawa is a failed social housing policy, that sounds to me. And this is a product of the governorships of Jokowi and continued by Ahok, I believe. So I'm wondering, what are the improvements of that kind of social housing policy by the next governor of Jakarta? Is it better, or how would you see that one? Thank you.
Bapak in black shirt, please.
Check. Thank you. My name is Yogi Permana from Leiden University. My question goes to Mbak Elisa. Thank you for a very exciting presentation. When you end your presentation, you mentioned about the planning insurgency. I think it's kind of quite cutting edge discussion in the planning discussion, right? And I just wondering why that we can find planning insurgency in Jakarta with the Kampung Susun case that you already mentioned, but we rarely to hear about this kind of insurgent planning that happens in other cities, since the eviction happens in every other cities in Indonesia. So my question is that any contextual driver that makes why we can find insurgent planning in some cities, but we cannot find in others? Yeah, thank you.
Mbak Elisa, you want to start?
Yeah, hello Asrul. So yeah, actually this is all government program, and I think one thing that make it different with typical housing solution from government, because this one is financed by infrastructure levy from developers, so it means that it will free us from many regulated Ministry of Public Works standard in terms of Rusunawa. So it allows residents to have to bring creativity, and also allow residents to design something that probably much larger than original Rusunawa design. So it also enable them to push certain zoning or program. So another thing, actually, they're coming from national government. So under the program called DAK integrasi, I don't know how to say DAK in English. Anyway, so Dana Alokasi Khusus Integration, which is the combination between water, sanitation, public housing, and providing infrastructure, which is actually is a Bapenas program, but they got inspiration from Jakarta. And it's a multi-years program which is allowed by the local government to propose that to 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 Bappenas, and then allow to have like 1 year in planning and another year to another couple years to do implementation, allow some participation program in the beginning, and of course at the end of the program you have to resolve all kind of agrarian conflict in the kampung. So it was quite a successful, I think it's a quite successful program, and even Bappenas asked us to do trainings for the civil servant for that the akad integrasi program, and some of the trainings also using Kampung Aquarium as the cases. So for Payudi, actually the insurgency planning is not only in Jakarta, but also in other places, like for example our network Arkom Jogja, which is also using the same thing, but they are facing different difficulties because they have to meet the Sultan ground thing, which is I don't know how to say, and I think let the Arkom Jogja explain better. But our cases, like for example in Makassar, we manage, our network also managed to have this land sharing policy, which is facilitated by the current mayor of Makassar, Pak Dani Pomanto, which is quite successful until today. So it really, I don't want to say political will, but you know anything goes, and it really have to be works both ways, not only by the political leaders, by the urban leaders, but also by the civil society as well.
Thank you, Pak Zulfan. Yeah. So, is it a failed social housing? I guess I have to also note that Rusunawa has been going for since 1990. So the oldest Rusunawa, I think, is built in 1992 or something. Yeah. Is it fail? It's failed because I think it fails to fulfill the government expectations. But is it fail as a housing? Not really, because there are also people who, you know, regular tenants who like to live there. So as a background, so in 5 years, Jakarta provincial government expected to have new house for 250,000 new housing, and Rusunawa units is only like 2% of that. 8% of that is Rusunami, and 90% is expected to be provided by the market. So Rusunawa is a failed housing without, if we don't understand the characteristic of poverty and vulnerability in Jakarta and what the surrounding structural forces that enable people to move out of it. So I think we have to expect that some people, without structural changes at macroeconomic level, would have to be subsidized for as long as they live in Rusunawa. There would be a portions of Jakartans and urban majority have to be supported by that if there is no changes in the macroeconomic and the poverty. Thank you.
Excellent answers by both presenters. Now questions from online audience, please.
Yeah, for your information, before that, we still have 150 attendants online. So staying until the end of the programs. Thank you for online attendee. We have one question, two questions from one person. It's from Rizkiana Sidki, Universitas of Diponegoro, Semarang, Indonesia. One question for Mbak Elisa. Have you ever known horizontal conflicts within the community? How you deal with it and how to maintain the sense of community? And for Mbak Clara, do you think the Rusunawa scheme can be used as climate adaptation measures to resettle people from hazardous areas? Thank you.
So there are plenty of horizontal conflict. I only show you the nice one. So even I was in the middle of, showing they are throwing stone within each other because, there's one group want to have money as compensation. Another group have this one compensation rebuild the kampung. So it happens. So that's why community organizing and also the role of community organizer is very important. So they know how to, okay, let's cool down first. Let's have this cool down phase and then probably have, reconciliation phase by trying to, they know how to kind of like navigating themselves among the key actors. But sometimes if it's really cannot be resolved, then it cannot be resolved. So even for Kampung Aquarium, there are like small groups, like 6 families who really want to just get money. But at the end of the day, they cannot get money because the majority wants to have the kampung being rebuilt. So those 6 families have to, even though the Kampung Aquarium leaders already provided 6 housing units for them, but they really choose not to live there. So that's something you cannot really resolve. So yeah, that kind of thing happen. Sometimes it can be resolved, sometimes it cannot, but most of the time, if we patient enough and willing to listen, and good community organizer is the answer. Some of the tips to resolve the conflict within the communities, within the residents. I think that's. Yeah.
So thank you, Ki, for the questions. Resettle climate change adaptations, I think it can be done. It just have to be in a respectful conversation, and it takes a long, long time. And I guess one of the key is to give them authority to decide, to give them options, and to give them support to maintain that options for long term. So because climate change is here for good. So, it has to be also sustainable, because you don't want to resettle people in one location and then the next 5 years you have to resettle them again, right? So it has to be a long-term solutions. And one of the key things is it has to be customized to their own decisions, and they have to be the owner of the options. Thank you.
I think we still have 5 minutes, yeah. Let's open another round of questions. Mbak Linda, please. And the lady in the back.
Thank you for the 2 presenters. Just want to connect Mbak Elisa point with Mustafa before about the strength of civil society that is a key for the democracy in urban area. Just want to check and ask your opinion. You mentioned that number 1, there are quite a unique collaboration among actors that you mentioned within the case of Jakarta. And number 2 is when you show us as well that there's always political parties join the team, FPI and all that. Do you think this is a very unique of urban participation from the civil society point of view? Just want to check, ask your opinion about that. Thank you.
The lady in the back, please. The mic.
Thank you both so much for your speeches today. I thought that you made a really interesting point, and I wanted to ask more about how authority and power for individuals living in these kinds of facilities translates to developing personal economic independence or subverting the challenging structures that are keeping them in poverty.
Is it a question to Elisa or to Clara?
It's, I guess, more related to Clara's later points. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. 1 minute each, please.
Yeah, like again, I think for Kampung Aquarium case, they are very pragmatic, and they are open to anyone who can help us. But they get, how can I say, filter along the way. By the time the movement become very, how can I say, related to the housing rights, then Gerindra and FPI just suddenly out of the picture. So it become our involvement become more intense. So it really depends. FPI is very good in terms of providing water, food by the first month of the eviction. And then Gerindra also support the tent and all those things. But by the time you have this content about human rights, about housing rights, then they suddenly out of picture. Yeah.
Thank you for the questions. So about power and how it translates, it's my whole thesis, so stay tuned. About economic, I think what needs to be criticized here is the idea that give man, what you call it, a fish, right? But the ocean is, there's no fish in the oceans right, anymore, right? So the idea that you give skills, you give a little bit capital, people would lift themselves out of the bootstrap. But as we know from the economists, what lift people out of the bootstrap is being part of the worker, manufacturing, and you know, having assets and lands on their own. It's not that small businesses out of a unit in a gated remote area of Rusunawa that won't lift people out of poverty. That won't happen. I guess. Thank you.
Right, so yeah, I think we have come to the end of this session. Let's give our excellent presenters appreciation. Yeah. Thank you for your attendance today. So I will return the session to Ed and Mbak Linda.
Thank you, Rini, and thank you to all our wonderful speakers today. So just a couple of very short housekeeping notes. About 70 people have booked to go to the social dinner tonight at the Yamcha Place, 32 West Road. So you should have got an email about that yesterday. So the details are in there, but just a reminder that it starts at 6:30 for a 6:45 serving, and that's 32 West Row in Civic. If you did not book, unfortunately it's too late for you to book in now, so bad luck. But in fact, all is not lost, because there is some leftover food from afternoon tea out the front yang sudah dibungkus and boleh dibawa. And in fact, even if you're going to Yamcha and you're feeling peckish now, you can take some of that with you as well. And otherwise, thank you so much for everyone, for our online participants, for our speakers, of course, and our chairs, and for also the audience who stayed here today. See you tomorrow, 9 o'clock sharp. Thank you.